Barnaby Brocket, Chapter 5, The Magician on the Bridge. 2 weeks later, Barnaby was tied to the living room sofa reading Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped when Eleanor walked in, dragging behind her a heavy parcel with a tag attached that read, "For Barnaby, from Eleanor Brocket." "For me?" he asked, looking up at his mother in surprise. "Yeah, it's a special present," she told him. "You'll like it, I promise." Barnaby pulled the wrapping paper off to discover a brand new rucksack inside. It was a little too large for his small body and had a pair of strong shoulder straps dangling from the side. "It's for school," said Eleanor, who had given up trying to find a school that none of her friends might have heard of and settled reluctantly for a local primary. "But I already have a bag," he said. "Yes, but that's to keep all your school books in." This new one, explained Eleanor. "Well, just put it on your back and you'll see what it's for." Barnaby reached down to pick it up and, to his great surprise, found that it was almost impossible to lift. "It's so heavy," he said. "It feels like it's full of rocks." "Don't worry about that," said Eleanor, as Captain W.E. Johns drifted into the living room to check on his master. "Just put it on, all right? I want to see whether it works or not." Barnaby struggled to lift the bag off the ground, but eventually he managed to get his left shoulder into one of the straps. He almost fell over when he did so, but somehow he managed to get his right arm in too, and then everything balanced out. His feet hovered off the ground for a few seconds and he started to float, but after a moment the weight of the bag was too much for him, and he came back down to the floor, his shoes landing on the carpet with a satisfying thump. Captain W.E. Johns, dissatisfied, barked. "It works!" cried Eleanor, clapping her hands together in delight. "I got some sandbags from the council after I told them that I was worried about flooding. I put 2 inside to balance out your weight. It's perfect, isn't it?" "But I won't be able to walk with this much on my back," protested Barnaby. "It hurts too much." "Oh, don't be such a baby." Barnaby, anxious to please, did as he was told, but it wasn't easy. During the first week, his shoulders turned black and blue from the weight that he was being forced to carry, but in time they grew stronger, and he didn't notice it quite so much. As every month passed and he grew a little more, Eleanor put extra sand in the bag, and the whole painful process began all over again. The curious thing, however, was that whenever he was forced to stay on the ground, his ears hurt a little. In the classroom, Barnaby's ankles were secured to his chair by a pair of handcuffs, and he was able to keep his hands and body free in case an important visitor, like the Prime Minister or one of the Minogue sisters, happened to stop by on an unofficial visit. The school, like Alistair and Eleanor, was not keen on anybody who stood out from the crowd. The only thing that made Barnaby sad was that his friend Liam McGonagall had not been sent to the same school. His family had moved to India, where his father had been offered a job designing computer accessories, and they fell out of touch, as sometimes even the closest of friends do. A year passed, and then another, and then 2 more, and Barnaby turned 8. He still slept in the lower bunk in Henry's room, and had been given the top shelf of the bookshelf in order to store his growing library. It made a lot of sense, as he could float around the ceilings as much as he liked, reorganising the volumes, moving all his 3 Musketeer books into one place, and keeping his treasured orphan collection, Oliver Twist, The Cider House Rules, Jane Eyre, close at hand. Barnaby Brocket felt a special affinity with orphans. And then one fine February morning, his teacher, Mr. Pelford, announced to the students that they were leaving the school grounds on a special excursion. "What's the most famous attraction in Sydney?" he asked, looking around the room for the sea of hands that never appeared. "Catherine Flowers?" "The Westfield Mall," she said, shrugging her shoulders. "Don't be ridiculous," snapped Mr. Pelford. "Stupid girl." "Marcus Foot, the most famous attraction in Sydney, please." "The Opera House," replied the boy, who had seen a play there once and had dreamed ever since of playing a great Shakespearean hero on the Opera House stage. Preferably someone who wore tights and carried a sword. Marcus Foot, an unusual boy in many respects, thought there could be nothing better in life than prancing about in a pair of tights while brandishing a sword. "Yes, but that's not the one I'm thinking of," said Mr. Pelford. "Come on, someone else, please. Someone with a brain in their head." "The Great Wall of China," offered Richard Lestrange. "The Niagara Falls," said Emily Piper. "Big Ben," shouted the Mickelson twins, Amy and Amy. "For heaven's sake, children," said the teacher, throwing his hands in the air. "It's the Harbour Bridge, of course. An extraordinary feat of engineering, at the top of which, I might add, one Gina Llewellyn agreed to become the second Mrs. David Pelford on a rainy July afternoon some 7 years ago." The children looked a little sceptical that Mr. Pelford could possibly have persuaded one person to marry him, let alone two. "And as a special treat," he continued, "I've arranged for us all to climb the bridge this afternoon, like the tourists do. Yes, even you, Stephen Hebden. I don't want to hear a word about your chronic vertigo." Happy to do something different, the children made their way outside to the waiting bus, and on the short journey that followed, Barnaby looked down from the ceiling as the other children read comics, examined the contents of their handkerchiefs, or listened to their iPods, and wished that he could take the empty seat among them that was rightfully his. When they reached the bridge, they were met by a young student named Darren, "Call me Daz," who had messy blonde hair, a sunburned face, and the whitest teeth Barnaby had ever seen on a human being. "Good morning, bridge climbers," he shouted, looking as if he had never been quite as happy as he was at that very moment. "Is everyone ready to see Sydney from above?" There were a few grunts from the children,